Without further delay, I wanted to introduce our guest speaker. And you can see Allison, she's waving right there. Allison is the sustainability coordinator for, yes, Allison and her bee friend on the bunk bed, is the sustainability coordinator for the city of Key West. In addition to having led probably over 30 applications for FEMA and Florida current grant programs, Allison also is a founding partner of the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. She's an active participant in Unified Sea Level Rise Predictions, Vulnerability Analysis, and Regional Climate Action Plan. So you can see how all of these things professionally that Allison does really lends itself to the work she's doing in Key West. She co-wrote the city building permit allocation system requiring basic green certification, and a lot of her background, which I was interested to read about, is actually in green living and energy education, which is really cool. And that led to things like cisterns and base flood elevation changes for the new residential buildings. She also was the lead on height referendum vote to allow single family homes to raise out of the base flood elevation. So Allison has had a long career of helping people and helping communities, and that's what she's here to talk to us about today. So without further ado, Allison, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow you to share yours. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Allison.
There it is. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for that great intro. Sometimes you forget everything you've done. Let me put this on full screen mode. Oops, it went forward one already. Are you seeing the regular screen or the presenter screen?
We're seeing the right one.
All right, we're good to go. I can no longer see you, but I'll go ahead and start. So yeah, my name is Allison Higgins, Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Key West. And I really want to thank Sea Grant and our partners, Fair Insurance Rates in Monroe, and our UF-IFAS extension folks with our county. This was an idea that was part of my wish list for at least 5 years until this grant opportunity came up, and apparently we were the only one funded for that fiscal cycle. So I was very excited to help this idea get wings, and we've been learning something every day because of it. So we'll go ahead and start. So as with all of your communities, storm surge has played a disruptive role in the Florida Keys. Hurricane Georges in 1998, Wilma in 2005, and Irma in 2018 affected many homes at ground level. The surges resulted in not only loss of personal items, but missed work days, loss, temporary homelessness, poor environmental conditions, great expense, and even greater stress and grief. Irma was responsible for an estimated 3,000 people moving from our community, including 140 students. Storm surge is also a stressor under blue skies. Recent insurance fluctuations due to bigger waters in the past, and now risk rating 2.0, and we are in the middle of a FEMA remapping effort, have greatly affected the affordability of many of our homes, causing low to medium income homeowners to either foreclose or, if lucky, sell low and leave our community. So why is this? And that's because most of our lowest income homeowners live in our almost oldest homes. The oldest homes in the Keys are wood framed on the highest ground, and they're easily moved or elevated. But our almost oldest homes were built in abundance just after World War II, when families were booming and nobody was thinking about storm surge. 90% of these homes are concrete, slab on grade, incredibly sturdy, but really heavy and expensive to elevate. This one right here, I'll take you through. Post Irma, they had to gut the place, and so they were, because the estimate for elevating from the entire structure from the outside was too expensive, a new technique in the Florida Keys is to, whoops, it didn't do it. Oh no. Okay, is to take that roof off, gut the inside, but keep all of the walls, actually fill the bottom of the house. And so you're raising the inside floor of the house you put an extra story on, move your windows up, move your doors up, and then put a new roof up at the top. There'll be another picture of this. This was supposed to flash through and show you. When we get to the end, if we have time, I will make sure you get to see this because it's a pretty cool process. So this slab on grade concrete homes disproportionately hurt our low income families, because this is, you know, where our multi-generational, where our workforce is, you know, our teachers, our hotel clerks, and our house painters. So we've tried a couple of different times. FEMA has been not worked well for us. We made a major effort a good 6 or 8 years ago for FMA funds. And we specifically reached out to our severe loss properties and repetitive loss properties. We have a lot because we had two large hurricanes within the 10-year span. So we sent out 1,300 postcards specifically to places that we knew would be eligible and fare well. We got 150 responses from that. From that, we had 100 people show up and actually learn more about it. 28 people turned in applications. 14 actually made it to the site and structural analysis. 10 got submitted, and most of those FEMA just said, yeah, you should knock it down and rebuild, which is only $150,000 that they give you to that. And then even the people that did get it couldn't find the financing on their own. In the end, 2 were eligible for raising. And so we really knew that we needed to be more, bootstraps in this. And there was so much competition for FEMA funds, and we are property rich, but our wallets are poor, and so they can do a lot more. They can do a lot more houses somewhere else than in Key West in particular. So this project met a lot of we've got a local adaptation coordination team, mostly internal staff, but these are our key goals that we wanted to work Key West wide, and actually Florida Keys wide on, and this was right up that alley. So we applied to Sea Grant and got this great grant, and so our goals were to look at elevation projects that had already happened and do some summary flyers to help people get their heads around the project, to hold Keyswide workshops about what we'd learned and what you can do and who you can talk to, and assist homeowners with putting them together with the key people that could help them with their specific homes. We wanted to organize cooperative bidding to make it cheaper for those homes to be elevated. And the lastly was just to document Disseminated, which I'm doing right now. Oh, this one might show it to you. This is why. So step 1, we wanted to do 12 summaries of recent home elevations. And the key thing was to interview either the homeowner, the general contractor, a structural engineer, the architect, somebody that could help us find all this information that you see on the left there, to help us tell the story of these homes. This should work. So as you can see, they, in this particular case, this is about 3 blocks from me. So that's why I was able to get all these great pictures as it came along. They completely took off the roof, gutted out the inside, and then just raised everything from the inside. So the floor came up to where you now see is the bottom of the new door. They just filled that from the inside and used the existing foundation. Raised the windows, put on whole new masonry on top, and then put the vaulted roof. And that is now a functioning duplex today. So the pros and cons of this approach. One, in looking through, in talking to people, we learned that there was a lot of great examples that had happened in Key West. And when we finally got a hold of the contractors, they had really great, they remembered a lot of details and were able to find a lot of things. The cons were they're very busy. And I mean, I think they are in general, but I think they're even more so now with COVID. Everybody was, doing more home projects. So it took so much nagging to one, just be able to talk to them about the project. And then secondly, once they had talked to us about it, They said they were going to follow up and give us those costs that we really needed that were part of the get your head around, you know, these individual projects. But in the end, they really didn't want to share their costing of things. And so we ended up having to just dig into the permits to see what it was stated there. That's problematic because at more than half of the cases, these elevations were triggered by the 50% rule, which means they had done some sort of remodeling that said, oh, you've spent more than 50% of the value of your house, which means everything has to come up to the code, including the elevation of your house. So the permit itself would have 3 or 4 major things, including elevation, listed on it. And 2, we all know that the actual prices listed on the permits aren't necessarily the full price, because the higher the price is, the higher the price you pay for the permit. So it was the best that we could do for that. And so that was the best, you know, that we can do. But we at least created this idea of what the budget would be, even though we didn't get a single contractor to fill it out. But in the end, we did produce, I believe, 8 or 10 of these. And so as you can see, it's very infographic style, just to really help people get their heads around specific properties in our community. So it's talking about, you know, why did they elevate? How long were they away from their home? What, you know, roughly what was the cost breakdown? What was your change in home value or your change of insurance? And then we list, if we were able to find the information, who helped on each of these projects as far as local contractors. And I'll show you where to find these at the end of this presentation. This wasn't originally part of the idea, but we came to realize it was really important. We really only had a handful of people who had experience, and they were all in Key West, and this was meant to be a Keyswide project. So we found this wonderful company that was working out of Virginia Beach area and had developed a home raising academy. And so we worked with them and got a Fair Insurance Rates Monroe, who was my labor on this event, for actually the whole grant, was able to get a donation to help put this on. And what was nice was not only did we have the 10 contractors that were Keyswide that attended, we were also able to pay for one government person from each of our 6 local governments to audit it, so that we could learn, you know, they could learn alongside of these things that might be coming their way. And then when we followed that up on, because obviously as a local government, we cannot say, use this guy. Firm wanted to, Fair Insurance Rates Monroe, has done a request for qualifications before. And so one of those qualifications was having taken this workshop, but also we didn't, you know, that's not the be all end all. How long have you been in business? What's your insurance level? You know, those sort of things. And again, they were able to find the time to attend the certification, but you can see this was back in February. We've only had 2 of the 10 contractors fill out the RFQ, even again with a lot of nagging. So this, and here you go. So it was a great course. It was a handful of 2-hour stints for 4 different nights, 2 on one week and 2 on the other. But we had, like I said, 10 contractors show up. And so we just really need to, I need to move this, the little WebEx bars right over my my wording. Again, the solution was just nagging. And one of the things in working with our county now has a mitigation administrator that is helping to put on solicit FEMA applications for this year. We just decided, you know, we can't just list 2 people. That's not going to be very helpful because they'll be swamped anyway. But we can at least make this table that comes from the flyers that says, hey, these are just past projects that happened successfully. You know, here's at least a handful of other names that we know. But our intent is between now and next year's FMA cycle to try to hold this course a couple more times and try to get 10% of our contractors through this course. Because we're having a lot of phone calls right now, people who are just still trying to find someone to help them with a budget for the FMA application. Advance. Oh, because I'm not in there. Here we go. The public workshops, obviously, so with COVID, we weren't doing in-persons, but we still actually did geographically relevant workshops because each one of our areas throughout the Keys is served by a different local government, which might have completely different zoning rules. And so we did, we had one in the weekday AM, weekday PM, weekday 6 p.m., Saturday morning, so that you could 80% of the webinar was exactly the same, except for that piece that was specific to your region. All of these got recorded so that people can watch them on their own time if you couldn't make it then. We really tried to reach out to our low-income neighborhoods, that's what it's supposed to say, and emphasis on these low to medium. Actually, no, low neighborhoods means low geographically, and then low medium income. Emphasis on our repetitive losses and working on what pieces did they need. The FEMA is coming, the FMA is coming up. You need your elevation certificates. What are the predictions for your area? What documents do you need to have on hand? So we had some really great partners for the low income outreach. Our county has a weatherization assistance program, and they specifically can only spend that money on folks that qualify at the low income level. So they had a long list of folks that were interested, and as well, our Habitat for Humanity group works with homeowners to help with various small repairs that might happen. So they were great. Zoom obviously gives you this wider reach and made it recordable. Our key thing now is keeping it up to date. Our mitigation administrator for the county has already said, I want to update this one piece. So we're at least going to do an annual review of our videos, and that gives us a chance to say, hey, updated version is out in front of you. I wanted to speak more about these photos. This was the first full-on elevation of a concrete building. You can see here they cut holes in the walls and then to put because they had to do a lot of bracing. While concrete is very sturdy, it's also very breakable because it's so rigid, because it's so sturdy. And so they had to put in a lot more steel beams. But the picture you see on the bottom left is as it is today. So that one they had to, they didn't fill it and they built a whole new floor. The next key step was to, now you have these interested, engaged, and aware homeowners, to connect them with a financial advisor that could work on, hey, it's going to cost you this much, but here's different ways let's look at your portfolio and see how you can pay for this and see what that return on investment would be, because you're going to start saving money in flood insurance right away and these sort of things. And then an actual technical advisor that could say, hey, your house already has some structural issues. You'll have to do that first and give us some estimates. Neither of these things worked out the way we wanted them to. So one of the things we really, really liked the sole person that we would send people to is because it was a great way to be able to collect feedback and frequently ask questions if you were all going through the same advisors. And that was a great idea. It was a great idea. But we couldn't find any one person we could just take to specialize in all finance. And again, our contractors were busy. We couldn't find one guy that would do that. And we were concerned that if we leaned on one contractor, that they wouldn't be able to put in for an RFP if we happen to do one in the future, that they would already be like an insider and it would disqualify them. But we didn't want to bring anybody in from the outside that didn't actually understand that everything's more expensive down here. So the key thing was, hey, here's all the things you need to know about. Here's your list. go talk to your own banker, because they're going to be the one that's, you know, that can help you the most. And that's what led us to the contractor training idea of getting a list of people, go out into the community and get your quotes. The next part was to organize cooperative bidding. And the idea here is, so, you know, the actual pieces of what the general contractor does, which is disassemble your plumbing, disassemble your electric, prep everything, and then the elevation company comes and picks it up higher than it needs to be, and then they leave. And while it's up in the air, your general contractor comes back and reassembles all of your connections, puts in your stairs, puts in the columns that will hold it up, and then about a month later, the elevation company comes back and puts it back on those things. All the elevation companies are nowhere near us. The closest one is about 5-6 hours away. And the farthest one that does work in this area is a good 13 to 14. And so, you know, we started talking about them. Hey, if instead of coming down for one job, what if we lined up, like, you know, 5 jobs for you, 10 jobs for you? Would, you know, could you give us an economy of scale on that? And they said, you know, yeah, of course. And that also, you know, would help us vet those companies and come up with kind of a template. And we did this based on, I don't know if anybody knows about Solar United Neighbors of Florida, but it's a nonprofit that's been working statewide here to do cooperative buying for solar panels. So the same idea, if 10, you know, 15 homes, actually what they do is they organize 100 homes that are interested in solar, and then go out for bid and say, what price would you give if I can guarantee you at least, you know, 80? And I just did that. It was a great deal. So that was the intent. We learned a lot on this. So the good news is there's really only a handful of qualified companies. And they are very amenable to this idea because, you know, they want the job, and why not have 4 or 5 in a row? Because of how we had went out to started training general contractors, this guy might already have a relationship with that company. This guy might already and we are nobody to tell them that they have to pick one, right? I'm City of Key West. I'm not anybody else's jurisdiction, and firm's a nonprofit, you know, doesn't have power over anyone. So one of the things that we talked about when we were talking to the elevation contractors, when we were looking at doing that request for qualifications in that first round, was they said, you know, what would really help is it's not just the you know, a number of homes at one time, but we need a place to keep our stuff. We show up with, you know, a tractor trailer of giant steel beams. And if, you know, if it's a, you know, any amount of time in between jobs, where do we put those? And there was a lot of examples of communities who had gotten HMGP grants, which would do a number of homes in their community. And so they had done actual RFQs, or requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, for an elevation company to serve their community during a certain amount of time for a certain amount of houses. And that's exactly what, you know, the Solar United Neighbors program was, except for from the nonprofit side. So our mitigation administrator is very interested in, you know, in this idea of doing some sort of kind of RFP, which would both say, hey, give us a price and we'll give you some land to keep your stuff. So we had, you know, really, really good discussions, and ideas came from that. Step 5, document disseminate. It's been great. Even just at the very beginning, when we, you know, got the agreement and hadn't really done anything yet, people wanted us to talk about the project. And so we've done quite a number of presentations on that. And what was really cool is also the chance to talk more at the state policy level about how state legislation could help. So we've got a PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy. Some of you may know of this or not, but it is an alternate finance way for someone to put more equity in their home. Right now for Florida, it can be for windstorm hardening. So it can be for a new roof or new doors and windows, but it can't be for elevation. And we'd really like to allow that to be one of those things as well. And then also, the state of Florida has a solar rule, which says, hey, if you add solar to your house, we're not going to count that as a change in your property value, even though it does. And so even if you've got a boost from having solar, they're really only counting the actual price of the hardware that got put on. And having something like that doesn't add to the value, increase the property tax that you are paying on your home because you elevated, because that would, kind of nix the flood insurance savings that you would get. So I want to show this particular house needed to be elevated only a couple of feet. We have a great we have a huge historic district and some very strong guidelines to keep it that way. And so they are all about elevating, because that is how you preserve some of these homes. But the key thing with them is, when they do, you can't, just because you could go 12 feet doesn't mean you should. So there's still a mass and scale that they're looking for. You can't all of a sudden go, huge amount above your neighbors. And that when you do, that you somehow hide, that elevation and make it still, look pretty similar. So this was pre-elevation. This was post elevation, and you can see, you can't tell really that guy got moved much in the end, but he is now out of the flood zone, and I think he's a foot above BFE. So obviously the pros of, having recorded all the sessions, they're available at any time. We've had a lot of stuff on firm's website and the cities. The con is sometimes just certain websites aren't, they don't show off things as well as you'd want. And so I want to have you guys follow me now to the website so you can find all of these things that I've talked about. I think I have to do a new share. And you'll see what I'm talking about it being, so this is firmkeys.org. And there's a couple ways to get there, but this is how I always go, because that way I can always see what they're working on recently. Risk rating 2.0 is crazy. This is our thing about fighting FEMA's proposed flood maps. And here, because we launched this back in the summer, it's a little bit lower on the page now, but visit program page. And a key part when we were just talking about this project early was trying to collect names so that as we learned not just with this project, but as we learned anything along the way about grants, that we had a way to contact people. So this is the top of the page. And then, here's the generic about the project goals. So this is where our elevation projects are. It looks front and center, but it's very light blue. Here are all of our projects, and with each one of these, you click on it and it'll take you to the PDF flyer. Ta-da. And you can see all of those pieces. And then the other key thing there is our videos, which I believe are right here. So we have one that is all the generic information, and then we have one where we combined all of the local government. So much like the Cooperative, let me do this. Like the community of practice, well, that's not what I wanted. Firm Keys has its own subscription page.
My name's Brian Shea.
Nope, I don't want you to talk.
George Garrett. ordinances for Marathon as they will.
But here's our 9 subscribers. I'm one of them. But you can see that those videos as well as other things that we've that firm has done are up on that website. So that's the couple of different ways you can get to these items. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I guess the only other thing I would say, let me stop sharing. Oh, let me go to my last slide and then we will wrap up. Yeah, so here's the 2 spots. And that's my last slide. So what's been really interesting is since we did that, we've just there's a couple places I talked about it. We've been working closely with the county's mitigation administrator, and he loves the help because he's new here. But you know, the budget template that we came up with to ask our general contractors to tell us the past budgets of the projects, they have already incorporated that into their website for the FMA grants, because they've had people walking in and just saying, giving a lump sum, you know, it's going to be 30,000, it's going to be 450,000, and we can't turn that into FEMA because they've got to run the benefit cost analysis on it. They want materials, labor, and fees. And so we actually created a fillable form that catches all that, so that when they contact a general contractor, they said, please fill this out in this fashion, so that there's the elevation cost is broken out from the stairs cost, which is broken out from the utilities, you know, unhooking and rehooking, and all of those pieces. So it's pretty exciting, and we are already, you know, we've got 4 weeks now until this FMA cycle is done. We've learned a lot along the way, and so we're already in discussions, like I said, to try to we probably won't get to 10% of our contractors by next cycle, but to hold at least 2 more contractors classes to work towards, you know, this RFQ for an elevation company to give it space, and really working to be ready not only for FMA next year, but also we just finished an Army Corps coastal risk study, and they said that about 4,000 of our Keys homes needed to be upgraded. And under that program, if it gets funded, the FEMA program would pay for 65% of the job. So that is probably less, what's the word I'm looking for? It's less competitive than FMA. So as long as you've done the same paperwork, you are ready, and that money should hit in about 3 years time, because they're going to do some of the infrastructure projects before they get to private homeowners. So it's already, you know, this original wish list idea, that this little seed that just stuck in my brain for 5 years until we were able to get this grant and pay for someone to help, is now just snowballing, which is great, and the timing is great. So I'm very excited and thankful. And with that, I am done and ready for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. We really appreciate that. And I do have some questions for you. So I'm going to try to see if we can get to all these. So the first question is, have you seen an increase in the number of people interested in elevating their homes as a result of the project?
Absolutely. What was really interesting is, even just having, you know, like I was saying, just having gotten the grant and knowing that we were going to do this, there was at least a half a dozen employees of the city of Key West that was like, Allison, tell me when tell me when this all gets going. Like, I want to raise my house. I'm very interested, but I've had no idea on where to look or turn or go, you know, with any of it. And so, yes, absolutely.
Great, Allison. Here's the next question. What kind of response, like when you were doing the Home Raising Academy, what kind of response did you get from the contractors? You know, were they kind of were they learning a lot? Did they have a bunch of interesting questions, you know, like kind of the back and forth, I guess, the relationship between the city and the contractors. I think the ultimate part of this question is, did it enhance your relationship, you know, the city's relationship with the contractors?
I think so. And yeah, and one thing that was really great is because we had the local government folks auditing, and a lot of them were from planning or building departments, that when, because, you know, some of the questions might not be technical from the teacher side, but were very specific local technical. And so, yeah, that was really helpful to have these kind of back and forth discussions on, well, what if this and what if that? And that was very helpful.
And I guess a follow on to that was just placed in the chat box was about if you'd have follow-ups with the contractors after the training. And hang on, how many of the contractors end up using the training?
Well, so that's the thing. I mean, I think that we've of the 10 that took the course, only 2 have followed up to put their name on the list for people to, you know, that have done the steps to be able to get their name on the list, to have people call them. And I think it's mostly because they're so busy. I mean, they took the time to take the course, so they were, you know, they believed in the importance of it. But they, you know, it's just another, and the one thing that we are running into, especially with the FMA grant, is usually an estimate for a job is free, right? You have someone quote you for this job, and it's a good amount of work to figure out all of those parts. And with the FMA grant, it's going to be at least 6 months till you hear you're going to get the money, and probably another year until you do. So for these guys that are so busy, they're not really excited to come out and give you a quote. We did have one that said, you know, well, as long as I know I don't have to do the job, because I can't take on the job right now, but I can come out and give you a quote. Like I can do a pretty good job. And I was like, good, that's all we need right now. You know, none of these people are going to be able to hire you right now. But it's been really interesting.
And I'm sorry, I've got more questions coming in for you, Allison.
Please.
So thank you. So one of the questions is whether or not you might be willing to do a train the trainer, so we could all do this. And I think they're referring to like the Home Raising Academy, you know, like the whole concept. They said this is great, impactful work. How are the flood insurance rates changing with elevation? So it's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah.
You know, is this something where you could do a train the trainer? And then the second question was, how are the flood insurance rates changing with elevation?
Yeah, we can definitely do a train the trainer and give you a lot of the templates that we used, you know, for the flyers and for the, you know, the video and all that kind of stuff of things that we covered. We can definitely, you know, put something like that together. And then, so the actual contractors trainer, I was just talking with the lady that helped us put it on yesterday morning, and you know, we're trying to talk about so they were able to squeak out, you know, something from their from this grant, this original grant that they had gotten to create it. And the reason why it was only 10 contractors was because the funding source of the grant didn't really want to do, you know, help out 100 Florida contractors, right? So the cap was 10, and that's why we had 10. So we also didn't publicize it really greatly. We just worked specifically with the Contractors Association, which is a local nonprofit, and you know, the first 10 that got in the door were the ones that did it. In talking more about expanding now, we're working what would be the magic number, and then what would be the price tag for that. This time around, they did it for the contractors paid $200. And what was really interesting is when we sat down, the first number that the certification company had given us was much higher than that. And we went to talk to the Contractors Association board and said, you know, this is the number. You said you're very interested in helping with that. Like, would you be willing to help subsidize or, you know, anything like that? And they're like, contractors pay for this kind of CEU stuff all the time. That's not a bad number. And we went back to the folks and they said, well, we can still bring it down anyway, and made it 200, which was very, very reasonable from what the first number was, which I don't remember, was I think around like $800, $100 a teaching hour. But because they're not doing these classes in person, the price for them to give that certification is also really cheap too, especially if you have, 20, 30 people on the line. So I think the key thing is for that is to really make sure you beat the drums on it. So if you have a local Contractors Association was the local nonprofit we worked with. We also have a contractors board, examining board. You can go to, especially nowadays, most of your city licensing departments might have, everybody's got an address list, but there might be an email list too, where you can do a blast out to general contractors to see if they're interested. And I think the biggest thing is like, hey, there's money coming that we intend to apply for that will put, that these people will need general contractors that know this business. So that's you kind of have to bait the hook for that as well.
Absolutely. Okay, I have one comment that was put in another question. Arnaldo said, thanks for the presentation. I've seen some similar home elevations up in Norfolk, Virginia, but it was often wealthy folks getting the funding. It's great to see it happening here in low mid-income communities. Fantastic work. So kudos to you having something.
Well, I'll tell you, in a number of these instances, these were over half of the summaries we did were people that had a ton of money, didn't have to worry about financing, so are like, how did you do it? Like, it wasn't there because they were doing a huge renovation, they got caught and then had to elevate, but it still gave us some really good examples and numbers. What I also thought was very interesting was both as part of the project, but also because I want to elevate my own home. I was calling around to get some quotes, or, had two different structural engineers come over, and they're like, so are you doing this because you have to? And I was like, no, because I want to. And they're like, yeah, you should really just wait until you flood. And because then you'll get an extra $30,000. I was like, I'd rather not flood. But it's really interesting because that's and these are the guys that, and actually, and one of the elevation contracting companies said the same thing. And I was like, I'd rather not lose my stuff, and pay all that money just to redo what I had before. So there's definitely got to be a shift in the mentality of on the contracting side of why this is important, and to show that there are workaday people who need this, and really kind of imploring more to that, community side of things.
Absolutely. And then the next question is, this person says, I've been hearing that for local areas, the risk rating 2.0 rates aren't giving the reductions for elevation that the old rating system provided. Is that a concern in the Keys?
We have no idea how this is all going to pan out. It's a lot like bigger waters. We're hoping it is just going to implode, that Congress is going to say, shut this down. This isn't what you said is going to happen. Think it through more. But in general, they've said, oh, most people won't have an issue and all of this, but they also gave a specific presentation to our county that said, within your county, this is what's going to happen. And that's not true at all. So with FIRM and our floodplain administrator and a couple of insurance agencies, we just started running properties through the thing, and it said, hey, it'll cost this much, which was nowhere close to probably only the slight increase, but it was going from a good $600-800 a year to $4,000 a year. Even if you're homesteaded, it still can go up 19% a year, which is still a major piece. And what was the interesting part, because risk rating throws out your elevation, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, having an elevation certificate saved you about $200-300 a year. But when we ran the same house and saying it was different elevations, it didn't help it, which is horrible, and it makes no sense. So that's one of the reasons, like, we're very hoping that everything implodes. The other thing that's very hard for us right now is we're also being remapped by FEMA. And so based on their models, it showed, that they were going to change it by 4 feet. So people who, so my particular house, which is already 2 below BFE, would then become 6 below BFE, and that's a major change. So we pull both the city of Key West, firm, and the county pulled together 2 different consultants to work on those models, and we have given our rebuttal to FEMA, and we're waiting on hearing back on that. So we have the hardest thing, and something we came to realize in the course of this project was we can't really tell you how high to elevate right now, but start at least just getting your ducks in a row. Like, because I can't tell you what's the magic number because it's still in play. But we're at least getting the mindset of what are the steps you need to do, what's the language you need to learn to speak in order to get the answers you need.
Great, thank you, Allison. And I just wanted to tell folks, you want to continue to put things in the chat box. I'm trying to catch those. So I think I'm getting up to date here with this question that Libby had put in about how much time are we buying folks really when we have things like sea level rise, so I guess kind of your opinion on that, like how much time these folks have after they've done elevation.
So Miss Libby is from the Keys. Good to see you, Miss Libby. So I mean, actually, when you're talking about elevating for storm surge, you're buying a lot of time. You're buying more than 2 mortgage cycles, because where we're at now still doesn't have isn't experiencing any king tide issues. So it's and one of the key things that's part of the big picture is, as we're looking to do any road elevation projects or pieces like that, when you raise the road, you push water somewhere, and if we need to work out, you're not allowed to push it into the private properties nearby, which means we might need to do easements to do that. So the more your house, doesn't get flooded by that, I'm sure we've all seen, after heavy rains on high tides, people have the signs in their yard that says, no wake zone, because people go tearing through on that road, and the waves from that are on people's doorsteps. But home wise, what's from the sea level rise aspect. So sea level rise is that slow and steady creep, and it's the storm surge that could happen tomorrow that's here. And so when you mitigate a home for storm surge, you've then taken care of it for quite a while longer. And so that's one of the reasons why we lean heavily on, and also because storm surge you get a 1% chance every year of that happening. And the other thing I'd say is and we just finished our post-disaster recovery and reconstruction plan. The more we can do under blue skies of getting people, if your biggest chance for change is when that really bad hurricane happens, right? So a number of all of your worst case scenario homes that are super low and super old. I mean, you can take a building that's a 60-year-old concrete building and lift it. You still have a 60-year-old concrete building, right? There's many other things that need to, be done to that house for code. So you've got that chance to be ready for, hey, when you have to rebuild, do it this way. And so we're looking at adaptation action areas to have this kind of extra layer of zoning that says, yeah, I know Florida building code says this. And for the Keys, ours is the highest. I think us and Miami-Dade have the highest wind ratings that we have to build to. But for some odd reason, Florida building code still says that asphalt shingles are the same as a metal roof. And so people that think that the metal roof is too expensive, we'll go for the asphalt shingles. That doesn't help them 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line when the next hurricane comes. And so we're trying to using these mitigation principles to make it so that we can all snap back better when the next hurricane comes and be ready to really enact change for the better.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments about being opportunistic immediately following storms. I've seen that so many times, right? We've got to be ready for that. So if anyone else has a last minute question, please place it in the chat box. But while we're waiting for that, Allison, if you'll place your email address, if you don't mind, if you'll just type it into the chat box when you get a chance, in case people have questions they want to just contact you directly.
Yes.
For more information. I know it was on your last slide, but in case folks didn't get that copy down,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
it's already down.
And we just really want to thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today. I know that you're really busy. I know you've got a lot of things going on, but this was such a great project to learn about. One that, I mean, many of us, as you could tell from the questions, are extremely interested in, and also things that we hopefully can take and, use at some point, maybe during a train the trainer with others. And then I see one other question that came through, Allison, if you don't mind, maybe speak into this about fortified standards.
Fortified standards is on my list. So we have not gotten to this at this point in time with the passage of our post-disaster response, and we are starting on our adaptation plan. Thank you, FDEP and FDEO. That is one of the things that we intend to see if that works as part of our higher standard. I really like using other people's certifications because that's less work on our side, especially when it gets, there's a whole updating schedule for when new best management practices come in. So I really do like things like fortified standards or LEED or Florida Green Building for that very reason.
Great, thank you, Allison. And we're going to kind of wrap up for today, because I would like to give folks an opportunity to kind of let us know how you felt about today, if there's some topics that you might want to know for the future. So I'm just going to put a link in the chat box if you don't mind taking a quick look at that. Pulling that up. It's just a quick 4-question survey to just sort of let us know what you learned today and topics you might be interested in. And Allison, thank you again so much. We so appreciate having you here, and we look forward to kind of continuing the conversation with you in the future.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. And like I said, we stumbled quite a bit, but learned quite a bit, and are in a really good place now. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, reach out and share with me what you're doing, please.